Hi, Debbie Moorhead. I want to talk about understanding the difference between men and women. And this is just a real quick, like snippets that I think will be most helpful for you. Uh, I think that I'm summarizing from different elements. Alison Armstrong, she has a lot of good information on this. Of course, John Gray. There's other places I've learned about the difference between men and women. And so I just want to share some elements that I think will be really helpful. When I have shared all of this with other couples, there's a lot of light bulbs going on, and I think that will be true for you as well. I may every now and then look down at my notes because I want to make sure not to miss anything. But the very first thing that I want to talk about with the difference between men and women, and the main reason why there's differences, I mean, there's a lot about us as human beings that is the same, but of course, we do have different hormones that are going on inside of us, and those different hormones do create differences in our brain and kind of how we function. So I want to share that with you. Alison Armstrong talks about kind of thinking back in the hunter-gatherer time period is one of the best ways to kind of really get the sense of how we are different, but it still plays out today. So one of the ways to think about what is it that makes us feel safest? What makes a woman feel safe in the world and what makes a man feel safe in the world are two very different things. And John Gottman talks about this too. I'm going to weave in some of Alison Armstrong's and John Gottman's stuff in this. So, what makes a woman feel safe in the world? Picture back in the hunter-gatherer times, and women would go out as a group. And they'd go out and they'd be walking along and they'd all be talking to each other to go out. And then they'd find the tree to pick from, or they'd found the berry bush to pick from. And then they'd spread out around that bush, but they would continue to talk to one another. Now, why would they need to do that? This is what would make them feel safe because they were talking to each other. They were giving each other attention so that if all of a sudden the bear came up on one side, they were already paying attention to each other. And then they could quickly, if the predator was coming, they could quickly all come back together and they could either throw rocks or they could grab each other's hands and they could run so that they could all be safe. So what makes a woman feel safest in the world is attention. And both John Gottman and Alison Armstrong talk about that. Okay. Now, what makes a man feel safest in the world? So now let's think again, hunter-gatherer times. Men are going out. They need to go kill the prey and bring the prey home so that they have food for their tribe, right? So how do men go out? They go out side by side. They make a few comments every now and then, but mostly they go out side by side. When they see the prey, they know this is a dangerous situation. And so, one person will kind of go and they'll go, and they'd each just do what needed to be done, spread around the prey, kill the prey, and then they would be safe and come home with the food for the tribe. So what is it that makes a man feel safe? Respect. Respect is what makes a man feel safe in the world. All right. So and again, funny, John Gottman in his one of his books, the guide for the Guide for Women, I think is what it's called. He says what men like or what men want, it's not what makes them feel safe per se, but I want you to listen to this. What men want is less conflict and more sex. Well, if there's less conflict and there's more sex, then there is a level of, what is feeling like respect. So I think they go well together. All right, so that's what you just need to know. So I want you to really think in your mind, if you're, have I been respectful towards my husband? And husbands, have I been paying attention towards my wife? Now, I'm going to talk about I'm going to get a little bit more into how that works with the hormones, what's going on with the brain, so that you can really, really understand this and why it makes sense that that's what makes them, what makes each of them to feel safe the way they do. So let me talk a little bit about the brain. So hormones do make a difference. Women, I'll start with women. Women have more what's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is that cuddle hormone. It's that nurturing hormone. Women actually do have more of that in their brain. So what that does for us is it makes us, the best way to describe it, Alison Armstrong describes it this way. It's like the way women think about things is it's kind of like almost like it's a plate of spaghetti or a spider web. Everything connects to everything. This happens in women's brains all the time. Everything connects to everything. Because women need to be, taken care of and nurturing. So they're always thinking, their brain is always thinking about how one thing affects the other thing. So, like a man says, hey, let's go to the beach. And, it's a fun, spontaneous idea, let's take the kids and let's go to the beach. And the woman goes, okay, but you know what? We have to be back by this time. And if we're going to go to the beach, we need to make sure that we pack the towels, and we better make sure we pack the sunscreen, and we better make sure that we pack some food, right? And the man is just going, let's jump in the car and go to the beach, which is a great idea. But the woman is thinking this could be affected by this, and the kids we better take a change of clothes, and we better do this. And that's just, everything is connected to everything for a woman. So a woman can, a man can walk into the room and to go to watch something on TV, and he'll step over the shoes, he'll move the dirty cup to the side, and he'll sit down and he'll wash, because and I'll talk about men and women, but men in a minute. But women walk into the room and they just see everything that needs to be done. The shoes have to be picked up, the dirty glass has to be picked up, the trash has to be picked up. Gosh, there's a lot of dust on the women basically see everything, because everything is connected to everything. And that's how a woman's brain works. When I was describing to one couple, after I had described this, the man just kind of looked at me, and then he looked at his wife, and then he looked back at me, and he goes, oh my gosh, that sounds so exhausting. And that's kind of how women do feel, which is why then when you don't notice things, and then we're going to get into this, when you don't notice things that they are noticing, they get, angry with you, and you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So, so let's talk about the man's brain. And so a man's brain, because of the testosterone that's in his, that has been there as his brain has been developing, a man's brain is more like, one way to think about it is it's separate storage units. Everything is in a separate storage unit. Or another way is kind of like a waffle, where everything has its own little space, right? And there's little walls between everything. That's kind of how a man's brain works. So things don't necessarily connect to each other. Basically, work is here in this storage unit, and wife is here, and maybe children are together, or each child has their own, or my friends are here. Each thing is in a separate unit, and their brains don't necessarily tie in or connect them together. Um, so let me go back for a minute about what that looks like then for a woman for attention. And I just want to talk about this for a minute and then I'll also talk about what that looks like for a man for respect. Right. So for a woman for attention, what's most helpful is when Allison was interviewing a panel of men, one of the men said, when I finally realized that the best thing that was helpful for me, thinking from that like storage unit or separate units, was that when I brought my wife in my mind into each one of those, and then I would think about how that, how she might think about it, or how she might be affected by it, that helped shift everything. So I think that was a great like tip from a man. I think the other thing, John Gottman described a scenario once where it's really, because again, your men's brains don't work the way that women's do. So when he walked into the kitchen to make a sandwich one time, he was making the sandwich, he finished making the sandwich and everything else. And he could have just gone, okay, cool, sandwich made, and walked away and eaten the sandwich. But he took the sandwich, he took a few steps, he turned around and he looked back and he thought, okay, how would Julie, it's his wife, how would Julie think if she walked into the kitchen? And then he saw, oh, darn it, I left the jar of mayonnaise out, and I forgot that. I left the dirty knife here on top of the counter, and there's a pile of breadcrumbs over there. So he walked back in, he put the mayonnaise in the refrigerator, he put the dirty knife in the sink, and he washed down the breadcrumbs type idea. So and then he's like, oh, okay, that's okay. And then Julie walks out and she's like, everything was fine. So there wasn't anything for her to kind of be bothered by. Because again, women are thinking about everything and how everything affects everything. And so it just becomes an added thing on her plate. So when you can think ahead about, oh, well, how might she think about that? Or how do I, think from, it's really paying more attention to how this is going to affect my wife. That makes all the difference in the world for her. So now let me talk a little bit about, for women, here's the problem. Women are worse. I mean, men just are kind of confused by women, right? But women tend to think of men like they are just a hairy woman. And so we tend to think that they think like us, and that therefore they should just know how to behave, but they're behaving like us, like a woman would behave. And men are not women, so that is just not the case. They do not think like us. And in fact, let me talk a little bit about what testosterone does for men. It makes their brain, the way they think about things, is what's called, Alison Armstrong calls a single focused. Men are focused on one thing. That doesn't mean men can't multitask per se, but their brains are really focused on the one thing. Now, that really has to do with the testosterone. Women, we have testosterone as well, but you have to remember that we have quite a bit less than them. We can think about women, you can think about like when you're really, really focused on a particular project, and sometimes you're very, very engulfed in that. That's some of that testosterone energy that we are doing. And if you like 10 times that or more, probably even 100 times that, I don't know, that there's an intensity to men because of the level of testosterone that really keeps them so single focused. So what you need to think about, well, how that looks, right? And what we can do that is respectful, and because I talked about what men can do to help bring more, attention to women. What we can do is realize this single focused aspect of men. And there's a few different things we can do. For example, men, and you need to know this, you need more of a transition time to shift from one thing to a woman, one thing to another. Women, because of that oxytocin, like we can be really, really focused on making dinner, and all we have to do is hear the baby cry, and boom, we're over there, right? That's just how our brain works. And men with their testosterone are more single focused. So one, men need a little bit more of a transition time. So I would encourage you that, like, if you're, when you're coming home from work in the drive home, and I even heard one man talk about that he sat in his car in the garage when he'd get home, and do an intentional kind of transition in his mind, and he would image his children's eyes and face and his wife's eyes and face, so that he was shifting himself into, I'm coming in the door, and when I open the door to go into the house, I am now shifted in transition here. So find some ways to transition. Before this was really known, now my dad did this, but the idea of, I get home, a man would get home, he'd go into the bedroom, he'd, take his wallet out, his keys out, he'd have the spot where he'd put them, he would change his clothes. That would give him time to transition. So it's really important for women to realize that when a man comes home, he needs to have a transition. So you can say, hello, honey, and give him a kiss and a hug, and then don't just start going, oh, and you wouldn't believe this, or I need your help here, blah, 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 blah. Make sure he's transition. And men, you got to make sure it's like, hey, I need a minute to transition, shift and transition all the way in, so that you're fully present for your kids and your wife. The other thing that is really, really helpful is for a woman, if you are getting ready to say something, or you have something important to say, it's really good to say, hey, is this a good time? Because if he's in the middle of something, even if we don't think it's that important, like watching something on TV, if he's not listening, and this is what happens all the time, and when I tell this, couples all kind of laugh about this, right? Is a woman starts to talk, and he's in the middle of something else, and we almost are training our men to just go, yeah, yeah, okay, honey, that makes sense, or okay, honey, yes, sure, right? Where they just kind of say it, but then they don't remember it. So like, you're telling him, hey, don't forget, you're walking through the front room, he's watching something on TV, and you say, hey, honey, don't forget, we've got or I'm telling you, we just made plans to go to the Joneses for dinner on Saturday night. And he goes, uh-huh, okay. And you keep walking thinking you've actually communicated that to him. And then when it's, Friday or Saturday morning, you're saying, okay, we got to start to get ready to go to the Jones. And he's like, you told me we needed to go to we were going to the Joneses tonight. Right. And that becomes a point of contention, because, you did, but he was single focused on something. So the best thing is, when you're sharing information, and information that you want to make sure he has, you say, hey, is this a good time? Okay, so you want to do that. The other thing, I'm going to go back to one other example of attention for women, and because this is one of the ones that always happens. So women, and maybe yeah, I'm just trying to think of the best order to go. Women, so we get home, we went to the grocery store, we get all the groceries, we have about 6 bags in the store, in the store, in our car, and we need to come in, and we start to bring our first 2 bags in, and the husband's sitting there, or the kids are sitting there, and you're like huffing and puffing and bringing the groceries in, and everybody's just doing their own thing, right? My sister had 2 boys, and then her husband, so her household was full of men, and and so right. As women, we're like, if I was sitting there and another woman came in and was carrying groceries, the first thing in my mind, because of that oxytocin, that nurture, is like, oh, do you need help? And I would get up and help right away. But men are single focused. So they're not even catching, again, they're not paying attention. They're not catching what's going on. And then we get mad at them because I had to bring all the groceries in, or we start yelling. It's like, can't you see I'm carrying the groceries? And you need to help me, and da 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 da, and we get mad, but it's just because they're single focused. So, my sister used to always go, hey guys, I need help, and men want to help. In general, men want to help. Hey guys, I need help. I've got groceries in the car. I need your help now. Right. So, but otherwise they're single focused. So make sure that women need to ask for what they are needing. Men are not going to necessarily pick up on or catch what they need. Now, a little trick is a man can say, what's one thing today that I can help you with? That would make a woman feel so safe and so connected, but also in the moments, kind of like what John Gottman did, how will this affect her, as I look back at the kitchen. But women, you have to know that men, if they're single focused on something, they're not going to even catch what we're doing or what we may need. So you want to ask for it. Let me talk about the other thing that's a really important thing is the difference between men and women, and kind of both men and women have the same emotions, but men's emotions are a little bit deeper. Alison Armstrong calls the well, waiting at the well. So our emotions are right at the surface. Men's are a little bit deeper. And so and also the thing about men is with their testosterone, they don't waste energy, what it feels to them energy. And so they're going to think about what they're going to say, and they're going to say what they really mean. All right. Whereas women, we actually do a little bit because our feelings are at the top and everything else, we're processing as we talk. So like a perfect scenario of that is, and this is one of the things that drives men and women crazy, drives men crazy, and it doesn't feel respectful to them. So I'm going back to the respect. So a husband will say, hey honey, what time is dinner? He is needing the answer. Dinner will be at 6 p.m. But because everything connects to everything for us, and because we process things, our tendency is to say, we tell stories. Our tendency is, you know what? The roast is in the oven, but I have to get the clothes out of the washing machine, out of the dryer first, and then I have to set the table. And so dinner, the roast will be done. Dinner will probably be ready around 6. Well, the problem is we've lost our man because he's looking for the answer and he's totally confused by where we're going. So if we can train ourselves to answer the question first, dinner will be at 6, then he will hear the rest of it. But if he's looking for the answer and we're going all over the place, he's really not following what we're doing. So we can practice making sure we answer the question first. And man, you have to understand that women do this and tell stories. And if I'm talking to another woman, the other woman would be following me. So if you start to get confused or lost, go ahead and say, hey, hon, I really want to hear everything you have to say, but can you just answer the question first, right? So start to work together with those things. The other thing that you want to really understand the difference is, again, what I was saying is kind of how men work, and they're what they're going to say comes, I know it sounds funny, but from a little bit deeper. So, so women, when you ask a question, the best thing is for you to count to 30 and give them the space to answer the question. Allison told a wonderful story of a scenario where a husband and wife are, just in the car together, and she's going, "Hey, honey, where are you thinking we should go for our vacation this summer?" And, again, women process. So, if you were asking that question to another woman, a woman go, "Oh, I hadn't really thought about the vacation. That sounds really cool. Yeah, let's think about, well, we only have this much money, so we can't go too far, but you know what? We probably could go, right?" And women would actually talk through that, but men don't. So this man, it goes inside and he's kind of thinking, well, how much money do we have? And when would be a good time for work for when we could go, and what might be some good options? Because again, he's not going to waste his energy on all of that testosterone energy, and he's thinking about that before he's going to say it and say it clear and direct. But for us, if we're not careful, we're sitting there, and what happened in this scenario is like, a few seconds passed and he didn't start talking, and she's like, you you don't even care about what we're gonna do for our vacation. You never think about the family, right? And he's just sitting there confused because he had just gone inside to try to actually answer the question. So women, wait at the well, count to 30. All right. So that's just another really important tip. Um, anything else I want to make sure? I think that, men do have a tendency to always want to fix things. So, women, if you are just wanting to vent or talk, you need to just say, "Hey, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need to tell you about this ridiculous thing that happened at work today." That lets the man know that there's no problem to be solved or nothing to be fixed. And then he can just sit and listen, and he'll listen better to us. All right, that's just there's a lot more to the men and women, but these are some of the practical things that I really think will be helpful for you. So I hope you enjoy this and really take all this in and see how you do some of this and how you can make sure to make sure to not do that. All right, take care. Bye.